my role at the World Economic Forum is to head up interaction design. I have a particular focus on building out knowledge and data products and community-based platforms. And I guess my interest in AI and innovation work was really focused on starting to build out relevance, interestingly enough. Even though a lot of my background is actually in design, I found that the engineers weren't able to solve a whole range of the problems that we actually had around things like search, recommendations, matchmaking systems, things like that. And I found that I was designing the algorithms for our search engines and for our recommendation systems. And also, as we were starting to put knowledge feeds through our forum systems, I was also having to design the knowledge models that we actually utilize to be able to transfer knowledge into the right places. And as you'll probably tell from the slides as I go through, one of the things that I now do is that I design knowledge models. Now, I've only got 25 minutes. And in those short 25 minutes, I want to put a notion that AI and innovation is actually part of a human-centered design and behavioral science trend. I want to expand on some of the forces within that trend and also suggest a way of thinking about product design as a way of scaling up into organization design. So first, when we think about the human-centered design trend, I wanted to put this up here just because there's a lot of complexity going on in the world at the moment, a lot of thinking that is changing at the moment. And the relationship here really is user experience thinking, user experience design, and thinking that's happening in the business world. There's sort of like a cross-fertilization that's been going on for a while. And if you look at the elements of user experience, was actually going back into the 1990s. What that was doing was actually saying, we need a process for getting requirements out of people so that we can start building software. What is that process? In the early part of the web, we needed to create websites. How do we do that? There's a process of creation, process of creativity to do that. Since then, that's evolved into service design. We've had Luke Wroblewski bringing out mobile first, basically saying that if we're going to be on mobile devices, we need to simplify as much as we can. The processes need to be simple for them to work on mobile devices, cut out the clutter, focus on the process. And we saw with, in 2011, the seminal article, Software Eating the World from Mark Andreessen, basically saying that there is a huge transformation of industry going on, which is about converting the way that we think our products into software, and that is going to change industries massively. We also see, if you look bottom left, Tim Brown and Roger Martin around 2009 actually introduced the idea that design thinking was something that could revolutionize the business world. Basically saying that bringing innovation into an organization required processes, it required creativity, it required an engine for change, and that was actually a design process. When you look at people like Daniel Kahneman, he's saying, well, actually, we're rethinking our thinking as well. We're actually looking at behavioral science. We're saying humans are kind of good at some things, not so good at other things. They have biases, they have anchoring approaches. They have two forms of thinking, fast and slow. So all these kind of all of these areas are starting to sort of like converge and merge into a large trend of change, which is bringing in platform design, networked thinking, how that works. And amongst it all, we're saying things like, well, in this complexity, it is getting so complicated, we actually need to start having methods and ways of thinking about how we map out experiences so that we can actually start designing the experiences that we want. And of course, Intertwingled, a recent book by one of the lead UX practitioners, basically saying everything is now interconnected. That's just the nature of the world, and it's increasingly complex. So human-centered design really is problem-solving approach to help us deliver new products. It's given us products and services, customer experiences, brands, and it's increasingly moving into actually designing collaboration itself, designing hyperconnectivity. If you look at movements and power, I mean, there's a recent book by Jeremy Hyman's at Purpose, which is looking to say, well, mass organization is something that you can actually design. You design movements for change. And increasingly, we'll be looking at designing algorithms, analysis, and AI. So when you think about AI, we don't actually have general AI yet. You can't just turn on an AI, you can't buy an AI into your business, and miraculously it's going to change that business. There's actually a design process, a human-centered design process, which is kind of necessary to make the most out of AI technologies, which is why I think it's really interesting the way that Ginny Rometty and IBM have been positioning themselves. They've been saying AI doesn't exist, but the acronym exists. And what they're wanting to say is that there's a symbiotic relationship between man and machine that we need to actually design and evolve. So IBM is saying what we're looking at here is augmented intelligence. We're going to augment people, we're going to augment jobs, we're going to design processes of change, which means that we're in control of the relationship with the computers. As she said, it's in the service of what humans do. So, if they're talking about cognitive, what is cognitive? In some respects, you could break it out. It's the relationship, knowledge, thought, experiences. It's the judgment and evaluation, our decision-making processes, how we utilize language, how we generate new knowledge. This really is the fundamental nature of cognition. And when you think about breaking that down, one of the things we're currently working on, I would say globally, is the idea that we're scaling our cognitive capabilities. Currently, a lot of the time we're working at the level of apps. You know, Uber has got cognitive capabilities built in it. It's using AI to optimize transport routes around the city so that it can pick up a pizza on the way and pick up your friends as you're going, that kind of thing. But really, we've got analysis and knowledge and collaboration, thinking, strategy, experience, so these kind of things that are coming out of thinking about what cognitive is. And there's a certain inevitability that we need to take this design process from designing individual AI and cognitive apps and take it up to an organization scale. So let's just talk about algorithms to begin with. I remember having a conversation, I think about a year and a half ago, with a colleague of mine. He basically says, don't ever use the word algorithm. It's like nobody knows what an algorithm is. You know, it's kind of like it's complicated. And yet, I now see him writing articles about algorithms. It's kind of like it's getting increasingly important to understand and think about what algorithms are. So, as a lead through here, there's an algorithm underneath these. This is like the latest sort of like connection that we're having with machines. Ambient intelligence is becoming a part of our world. So, Alexa is sitting in our house. We plug in our AirPods and double tap them and Siri answers a question for us. But if you want to have a look at really sort of what's happening underneath the hood, I mean, this is a very sort of simplified sketch of what's going on. But realistically, we've got people in their environments and we have a number of tools, a number of products like Nest, for instance. There are sensors and controllers in the house, Alexa or your AirPods. You tap them or you say something and they're listening. What they then do is then go out to the cloud services where it does some natural language processing. It converts your voice into words. It then extracts the entities from it and it works out what you're asking, what you're saying with a model of the world that it has. And it knows that you're asking for the temperature to be turned up by 2 degrees in the room because you're a little bit cold. But the fact of the matter is, underneath this, there's a range of skills. And we're actually categorizing in the algorithms what the skills are so that the skills know how to take the natural language processing, convert it into some tasks that it performs, which then communicates back to the Nest device, which turns up the temperature in the room. It's creating this kind of loop. And what we're really doing here is we're actually modeling our world. we're converting our thought into human-centered data structure so that the machines can start reasoning upon it. And from a user experience perspective, if you take something as simple as a train timetable app, like that may not seem like AI necessarily, but what the mobile-first kind of approach has said is, let's simplify, write down the process that people go through to make purchases and understand what their train travel is about. It's about process design. And when you look at, say, X.AI, which is a startup around calendaring, the majority of what they consider to be AI is actually process modeling. It's converting the user journey processes and understanding how people do calendaring with each other. And they've mapped that process out, what all the decisions are at those points. And then it applies natural language processing on the emails that are sent between people. And it works out where you want to go, what time you want to have a meeting. Do you want to have it at a coffee shop or otherwise? What are your preferences? All of these things are being actually put into the algorithms, into the data model. So actually when you see companies like Viv.ai, which broke out from the team that was developing Siri, they started saying what we need is like a skills, a tasks, a process-driven map of the world in terms of all the processes possible so that we can get Alexa or the AirPods to actually perform things for us with a voice interface. What that requires is if you want to know about wine or order wine, or you want somebody to come and pick up your dry cleaning for you, or you want to book a flight somewhere, that's a process that actually needs to be mapped out and modeled. So what Viv have done is they said, okay, right, we've made this model. Now the machines know what to do in sequence. They know how to process the natural language. They know how to talk to the computers. So a lot of AI is human-centered work around data structure and processes with user experience work. And we can think of this in terms of 3 generations of user interface. In fact, 4. We've gone through the click and the drag of the desktop. We've also gone through the mobile devices where we're looking at the tap and swipe. And now we're moving on to the sort of like the invisible ambient kind of interfaces with tap tap. But also underneath it all is the skills, the tasks, the process modeling, which is actually the machine-to-machine communication which is going on, which might surface in an Uber app, but actually it also allows the machines to just talk to each other as well, and to scale the relationship of the communication. And in terms of these processes that we've been working on for a while, it's not necessarily anything new either. We've been automating manual labor for quite some time to get really good car production, which is highly reliable. We've also had scripted conversations for quite some time from call centers, and you increasingly see that the new generation of chatbots are actually working with those scripted conversations because it understands that there's only really a few things that you want to know or to do. So boil it down, understand the language that is communicated, send a stock answer back. And where we're also moving towards is codifying our knowledge and our document review, because that's also part of the natural language processing work and the process development work. If you take legal contracts have a very particular structure. You can break that down, you can reason upon it, you can ask the computers to do the majority of work that, say, a lawyer might do, and then ask the lawyers to do more complex, higher level work. But actually that's one of the key things when you're looking at opportunities like blockchain. Blockchain is in many respects first requiring the process to be mapped out before you then add that sort of secure level of trust that the computers can bring. So there's a huge drive towards codifying knowledge. We're also scaling the speed of our analysis and finding patterns in the data. So from a pattern recognition training perspective, I mean, this is very much like the pigeons. It's kind of like this is just one instance. Like the computers can use lots of images around cancer, for instance, and actually start utilizing an ability to find patterns within that data. There's also patterns, say, in fraud detection, where you're looking at real-time transactions and data running through. The computers can say, I see a pattern there. That's an instance of potential fraud, for instance. I need to now flag that to a human so that they can actually act upon it. And the more we start doing this pattern recognition, the more we start joining systems together through the algorithms, the more we get to the opportunity of network effects. And in some respects, the more we can actually start thinking about a notion of, dare I say, a boardroom in the loop. How do you provide the right decisions to the right people in the right context, in the right way, through the underlying systems across an organization to be designed correctly? We're also building out collaboration networks. I mean, it's a fact that there's, the internet has basically enabled hyperconnectivity to take off. So we've got humans talking to humans at a scale that hasn't happened before. They can self-organize around things, but also the computers can self-organize by utilizing the common algorithms, the common knowledge models to be able to communicate. And we see that coming out in chat interfaces and things like that, and also the rise of augmented reality. And of course, underneath it all, when you look at Microsoft's purchase of LinkedIn, they've got a knowledge model of the jobs market, and they're really interested in productivity within the business world. So what they have there is a knowledge model. The economic graph could otherwise be a productivity graph in the future, which really allows machines to reason across that knowledge model. So when we think about organization design and codifying businesses, in 2015, Leah Bewley, a lead user experience expert, was working for Forrester, and she commissioned a survey. And it was saying, what are the barriers that prevent user experience design from having an impact across an organization? And these were kind of like the areas. I mean, there's culture, partial implementation. You can't finish the job, You just simply don't know what you're doing. You don't have the right people. There's all of these kind of problems. Lack of leadership. And then when you think about the cognitive opportunity, IBM did a survey a couple of years ago, basically saying, what is the cognitive opportunity, otherwise AI and whatever you want to call it? And there is a trend of digital transformation of industries, which is part of this overall AI trend as well. We're saying, cognitive and organization strategy, like 65% is saying it's really important. 58% is saying that it's part of, it's essential digital transformation. 62% say it's exceeding their expectations across, productivity, efficiency, business growth, customer engagement. And yet, 54% are beginners, 22% are advanced. And there's not really any classification of what those categories mean. And when you connect that with the previous slide, which is to say, well, in some respects, this is actually human-centered design work at play. People are bringing AI into their organization to make it do the things that they want it to do. If there's a massive problems with bringing UX into an organization, you've got the same kind of problems with actually bringing AI into the organization. What are you designing? What are you solving for? These problems are still part of the design questions. And then there's also the other problem, which is thought leadership, as The Economist pointed out quite recently, is kind of a bit of a mess. There's so much thought leadership out there that almost nobody knows what to trust anymore. You don't know whether somebody is actually an expert or not that you're reading on. It's a problem. So people are starting to say, well, if you're overwhelmed, you need to choose specific sources of information to know who to trust and what to do. Companies like McKinsey's are coming out with guides, executive guide to software development. How do you think about making software? It's really important. It's necessary. And I put this together as a way of thinking about platform design and the notions of scale and how these questions start applying themselves in an organization and a business context. If you think of algorithm design as one of the key parts of actually building out cognitive apps, and you think about a level of scale that designing and building algorithms has, and you go from low to high, and you look at the amount of control that you want as part of your organization over the community that you are interacting with, and that goes from high to low, you can actually start plotting where different companies sit within this. YouTube, very low community management, but high algorithm curation to actually get the videos out there as a product. Uber, extremely high in terms of their algorithms are actually helping to drive their business. It's helping to change the way that they're thinking about their business. But from the perspective of people and talent, the more you design the algorithms across your organization, the more you're going to look at data scientists, chief data officers, cognitive solution architects, infrastructure architects. You actually need a completely different range of skills within the organization to be able to think about how to become a platform organization with AI built into it. And excuse the complexity of this, but I do knowledge modeling for a living. So one of the ways that I've been thinking about it recently is if you think about a scale from product and app design, the individual instances that you might want to create, and then you think about taking that all the way up to organization design level, high scale, what's actually happening there in terms of the way that the company is able to think and think about its cognitive readiness. Its readiness for AI. The organization might be able to commission a pilot project on the side to do some amazing things, but is that connected to the overall knowledge infrastructure which is governing the talent, the strategy that flows through the organization? All of these connected problems. So I was thinking of it realistically in terms of a number of different eras. Like in some respects, we've kind of gone through the CRM era, or in fact, many of us probably still are in the CRM era, where the base data of everything that a company does actually needs to be in a database. It's not in the heads of the staff. It's actually in databases, which means that you can start using that data. That's very low scale. That's basically just data management. As you move forwards in a journey of becoming more cognitive, more AI-driven as an organization, you really need to think about mapping out the business, its functions, its talent, its knowledge. What are the component parts of that knowledge? And you need to actually get that into databases. And you start seeing the rise of graph databases and other technologies being really important in this kind of space increasingly. And I think I'm currently working with our HR department, and one of the key roles there is actually say, we need to define in a model what the talent is that people have, what the shortfalls they have, what the benefits they have, and the ability to map everybody together so that we can create ad hoc network groups of people working together on specific problems. I think as we move towards a cognitive era, basically, you've got interoperability. Your algorithms are really starting to power the organization. And when you look into what I'm just calling the unicorn zone, you've really got companies like Uber, Airbnb, Google, where the algorithms that they've created, the AI that they've been building, is actually influencing and changing the nature of the business decisions that they are making. And when you think about organization design, it's kind of like a step-by-step methodology, looking at workflow, looking at what's dysfunctional, what you can optimize, what's the business reality, what's changing, and you create a strategy for that. And in some respects, that is also, it's a design problem. And you can see consultancies like McKinsey, IDEO, Frog, a whole range of others who are actually increasingly doing organization design work because they've gone through this human-centered design process of helping people to create products and realizing that actually people need to rebuild, rethink, redesign organizations as well. And I think obviously the AI piece of that is a design component, which is part of organization design, which is part of understanding the data structures that underlie organizations, and so on. This is also part of the innovation function, which is, say, as I mentioned earlier on, 2009, the real aim for change by design and the design thinking books of that time was to bring the innovation function into an organization. In some respects, it's kind of like, you hire the right agency if the people don't know how to actually create what they need. But there's also other innovation functions, like the way that GE Fastworks has actually worked with Eric Ries, who wrote Lean Startup. Basically said, we need to create human-centered design practices across the organization so that we can rethink and redesign the way that GE works, and the Fastworks program is getting a lot of traction there. Or you could do a higher-up approach, which is what IBM have been doing. They introduced IBM design thinking, and they started hiring like thousands of designers to actually help them out. And of course, IBM being such a cognitive, AI-driven organization, they're really rating the ability for people to actually think through the process of what needs to be solved, how it needs to be solved, how you need to design with AI. And then you look at things like corp-ups, which is basically saying, if you don't have the culture or the technology as quickly as you can, we're increasingly seeing accelerators being created, whereby we're actually buying startups, accelerating startups to actually bring in the innovation you want. So it's kind of like AI is really complex stuff. The process modeling, the human-centered design is really complex stuff. So actually you probably need companies that are doing the particular kind of innovation that you actually want, and maybe actually just bringing that into your organization. So there's a number of different models that actually start connecting those things. So I think hopefully I've connected the design process to corporates in what is, I think, a very short amount of time, and I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much.